Okay, so Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Ayuni binti Muhammad Zahari. So today I will present about the crimes of aggression. Okay, for the introduction, aggression is usually viewed as a crime under customary international law. However, there is no universally accepted definition and no international court or tribunal that may punish offenders at the moment. It is formally within the ICC's jurisdiction, but the court cannot exercise its jurisdiction unless and until the parties to the ICC statute agree on a definition of the crime as well as the conditions under within the court may exercise its jurisdiction. Because the crime of aggression includes the participation of a state of a state's leaders and policymakers in specific hostile activities by a state, it varies from all others covered in this book in that it is intimately linked with an unlawful act committed by a state. Next is historical development. Aside from historical oddities, the Nuremberg International Military Tribunal had the first international trial for aggression under the banner of crimes against peace following World War II. Following the Second World War, the discussion in the United Nations War Commission and elsewhere that preceded the creation of the London Charter demonstrated that it was far from a widely held belief that a crime of aggression existed under international law as it then stood. Nonetheless, Article 6 Clause A of the Charter granted the Nuremberg IMT jurisdiction over crimes against peace, defined as planning, preparation, initiation, or waging of a war of aggression or a war in violation of international treaties, agreements, or assurance or participation in a common plan or conspiracy for the accomplishment of any of the foregoing. The corresponding provision in the Tokyo IMT Charter and Control Council Law Number 10 were extremely similar. The principles of international law recognized by the London Charter and the judgment were affirmed in General Assembly Resolution 95 Clause 1 of 11 December 1946, and the following year it directed the new International Law Commission to formulate this principle and prepare a code of offense against the peace and security of mankind. Following that, progress stagnated. The ILCs dropped principles which describe aggressiveness in the same way as the IMT Charter were neither accepted or rejected by the General Assembly. In 1950, the ILC was instructed to elaborate a definition of aggressiveness but did not succeed in achieving agreement. Although the ILC include a provision on aggression, in its draft code of crime in 1954, the GA decided that the code raised issues closely related to that of the definition of aggression and postponed further consideration until the report of the special committee established by the GA in 1952 to consider the definition of aggression. After protracted talks in the special committee, which were complicated by the tensions of the Cold War, a definition of aggression was finally accepted in 1974 by GA Resolution 3314. An individual who as a leader or organizer actively engaged in or comments the planning, preparation, commencement, or waging of hostilities by a state is guilty of an aggression crime. Next is relationship to other crimes. Aggression varies from genocide, crime against humanity, and war crime. In that, unlike other crimes, it affects the law guiding recourse to conflict, raising consideration of international law about state accountability for aggressive activities. Aggression creates an opportunity for further crimes to be committed. In the judgment of the Nuremberg Tribunal, therefore, to launch a war of aggression is not only an international criminal, it is the highest international crime, differing only from other war crimes in that it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the entire. War on a large scale generates enormous misery and nearly always results in atrocities. Although genocide is frequently referred to be the crime of crimes, there is no need for an abstract competition for the horrible title of the worst international crime. Another distinction between genocide, crime against humanity, and war crime is that whereas genocide, crime against humanity, and war crime can and often are committed by members of a state or a state-like entity's armed force, aggression can only be committed on behalf of a state and as a part of a state plan or policy. Furthermore, unlike the other crimes, aggressiveness is a leadership crime perpetrated only by people in position and power in a state. Next is state responsibility for unlawful use of force. The United Nations Charter established a new structure for international peace and security, demanding the peaceful resolution of conflicts and creating a collective method for states to act through the UN to repress aggression and other breach of international peace. While the collective system has evolved in a different direction than the drafters intend, the prohibition on the use of force remains as stated in Article 2, Clause 4 of the Charter, which states that all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state. This is the fundamental legal concept that governs the use of force, and it is based on customary international law. By avoiding the usage of the phrase war, we avoid debates over whether a given deployment of force constitutes a war. The interpretation and application of Article 2, Clause 4, which is at the heart of the norms of international law governing the use of force by states, raises a slew of issues. However, it is widely agreed that the reference in Article 2, Clause 4 to a state's territorial integrity or political independence does not limit the prohibition on using force. There is the debate over whether force employed the benign goals such as humanitarian or self-determination violate the prohibition. The rule does not include force employed with the permission of another state on its territory, but there have been debates about whether a state gave its approval in specific cases. There is also disagreement over the exception to the restriction. Individual or collective self-defense and force authorized by the Security Council acting under Chapter 7 of the Charter are the only exclusion universally acknowledged. Whether there is also an exception for humanitarian intervention is debatable. The next one is self-defense. According to Article 51, nothing in the current charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations. Until the Security Council has taken the necessary measures to maintain international peace and security, only when it is essential to use force and only where such force is proportionate, that is, not excessive in relation to the necessity to prevent or respond to the attack. It is defensive use of force legal. According to one point of view, the right to self-defense applies only when an armed attack has commenced. The opposing view that states have right to act to avert the threat of an imminent attack. It based on the continued existence of customary law or on the interpretation of Article 2, Clause 4 itself, and is supported by the practical argument that waiting for an actual attack is unrealistic in all cases, such as with nuclear weapons. The ICJ has left open the question of the legality of a reaction to an imminent armed attack. However, the claim to preemptive self-defense to avoid a trade is universally condemned as illegal under international law. Next is humanitarian intervention. The debate about military intervention is to prevent a current or potential humanitarian crisis without Security Council permission, demonstrate the challenge in making judgment about a state's unlawful use of force. According to the conservative viewpoint, humanitarian intervention without Security Council authorization and without the agreement of the state concerned violate Article 2, Clause 4 of the Charter, which can only be overruled by a rule of use cogens. A few dubious examples of humanitarian practice cannot constitute a new rule of customary international law, especially one with peremptory status. Other observers believe that there is a developing customary law norm that allows the application of the responsibility to protect. They emphasizes the international legal community's ability to decide ex post facto where a particular use of the alleged right is valid or not. This is arguably the greatest approach to pursue in this tricky area. While it does not have a universal support. Finally, there is the dubious view that unauthorized humanitarian intervention is permissible under existing international law. This viewpoint is based on arguments about the interpretation of Article 2, Clause 4 and the continued existence of a customary law right that has not been displaced by the Charter. The next is aggression by a state. The use of armed force by one state against another state's sovereignty, territorial integrity, or political independence, or in any other manner inconsistent with the United Nations Charter as defined in this term. Article 3 of the definition enumerates numerous examples of acts of aggression, stating that they are not exhaustive and that the Security Council may find that they do not constitute aggression in the specific circumstances, while other acts do. The phrasing entitled in Article 1 of the definition is similar to that in Article 2, Clause 4 of the Charter. Aggression by a state is thus more or less compatible with an unlawful use of force pursuant to Article 2, Clause 4, with the maintained distinction being that the threat of force is not included in the definition. The next is planning, preparation, initiation, or waging. The relationship between the state's act of aggression, however defined, and the act of an individual leader or other high-level policymaker is described in similar terms in the Nuremberg Charter, the ILC Draft Code of Crimes, and the Coordinated Discussion Paper ICC. Tough only the Charter explicitly mentions conspiracy, participation in the development of aggressive plans, which were largely dependent on Hitler's decision, was one of the most common ground for criminal responsibility in the Nuremberg IMT and later proceedings. In the law, it is difficult to discern between planning and preparation. Preparation had to be tightly linked with the planning. Preparation for some hazy future aggressive program was insufficient. Conspiracy as defined by the Nuremberg Tribunal differed nothing from planning and preparation. The charge of conspiracy was thus rendered redundant, leading to criticism of the tribunal. Next is prosecution of aggression in the ICC, jurisdiction of the ICC. In contrast to the other crimes triable by the ICC, the court shall exercise jurisdiction over the crime of aggression only in respect of state parties that have approved the modification embodying a definition and the essential conditions. Article 121, Clause 5 purports to give an option in procedure for jurisdiction over aggression, which was rejected as a general mechanism for the statute during the early stage of the ICC's inception. As a result, if national of one state parties conduct aggression on the territory of another, they may only be prosecuted if both states consent to the change. The statute's wording does not appear to grant state not parties to the statute any similar authority to object an amendment on aggression. This disparity in treatment has been criticized, but the situation is not dissimilar to that of non-party state is in general under the statute. The next is condition for the exercise of the ICC's jurisdiction. The crime of aggression presumes the state has committed an act when the ILC incorporate aggressiveness in its drug statute. It saw an issue with the ICC prosecuting person in the absence of a finding of aggression against the state in question. The ILC proposed that in light of the Security Council responsibilities under the UN Charter, the problem can be solved by requiring that before the ICC could exercise its jurisdiction, the Security Council first determined that a state had committed the act of aggression that was subject of the proceeding. The legal consequence of any such determination would be decided by the ICC. So that's all from me. Thank you.